Hi, Howie Campbell here. Thanks for stopping by. This is part of a series of videos of phone conversations I had with the people involved in the making of my album Northern Roots, Southern Soul. I hope you like it. Today, we'll be talking with Mr. Sam Brady, the keyboard man. Well, Sam Brady, man, really good talking with you about music and life and all that sort of thing.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, let me begin by asking you, brother, how did you get started in music?
Well, um, my parents were both very musical. Um, from the earliest age I can remember, there were always records on the record player. Mother playing piano, them singing in the choir. My father in a barbershop quartet. Just all kinds of musical influence. They started me in piano at the age of 6, whether I wanted to or not, and I didn't. I wasn't necessarily all that excited about it at the time, but there was some point at an early age when I was. My mother had music playing on her big stereo that just the hair stood up on my arm, and I knew then that there was something to this that I was connected to. And throughout the years, um, I started in band early. I learned to read early, learned to read music early. So by the time I was 10, I was trying to, play with other people, to get together with other folks and play. Every time something, kids would get a new record in the neighborhood, they'd come get me and they'd want to sing it, so they'd want me to play it.
Nice.
And by the time I was 12, I actually had my first paying gig.
Nice.
It wasn't much back then, but it was. And so all throughout my childhood, I was surrounded by music. I'm the youngest of 4 boys, and all my 3 older brothers were all involved in music in some form,
Hey,
whether it be band or piano or singing.
mhm.
And,
What kind of music was that was making the hair stand up on the back
you
of your
know,
neck?
um, that I really don't recollect in a song in particular.
Mm-hmm.
My older brothers, my oldest is 10 years older than me, so the span of music that they were listening to was mostly the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And um, so I grew up listening to that. My mother and father were both. My mother was a big classical fan.
Mm-hmm.
My father was an Al Hurt, a Pete Fountain
Mm-hmm.
band, instrumental Dixieland jazz,
Mm-hmm.
and just all of it moved me.
Nice.
But
Nice.
I remember, do remember the Midnight Hour. I think that was the name of the radio show. It that might be the wrong name, but Wolfman Jack was
Oh yeah.
was the DJ.
The
And
Wolfman.
some of the things when we'd listen to those shows,
Mm-hmm.
I just I'd hear stuff that just made me tingle.
Yeah. Well, so you've been playing music. I mean, you've done this for a living pretty much your whole life, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
I not only did it while I was in high school. The minute I graduated, I went out on the road, and I've, for the most part, have been doing it ever since. I've had spent a little bit of my older years being a part of a business that was not in the musical realm, but was still in an artistic, creative
Mm-hmm.
uh, type role. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
still played music all the time.
Nice, man. And so, when did you actually get involved in recording? I noticed that you're in the Malico book. They gave you a thank you at the end of the book there.
Wow, I wasn't even aware of that.
Yeah, there's this long list of people that they expressed thanks to, and your name was right there, along with Vince and Johnny Barranco and Tom Easley and Jewel Bass.
Wow. Well, my first time in the studio was after I had moved to Mississippi. I moved to Mississippi in '79, and I believe it was early '80. I got a chance to visit and record for the first time in a studio that no longer exists, but was here in Jackson. And it was one that Tom worked at, Tom Easley worked at, before Malaco. And man, I was on fire.
What was the name of that station, or that? What was the name of that studio?
North American.
Oh, okay.
And little did I know at the time that the engineer and the producer of that project would go on to, really move into the big time. They were part of the crew. The producer's name was Carson Whitsitt. And Bob Pickett was the engineer's name. And they were, I just thought they were very humorous. They were very, for us young boys, I mean, I was in there frightened, to be honest with you, because, Carson was what I would have considered a monster player, keyboard player at the time. He was just very encouraging, and got things out of me that I didn't know exist. And saying that, got me to play parts that I would have never thought before. But it helped mold the course of my thinking from there on.
Nice. Is that where you first met Tom Easley?
Well, no, Tom came later in the years. I can't recollect our first meeting, but when Tom was working at Malaco, he also got in the live sound business. And at the time, I was working for a music company, and we would provide backline gear for festivals. So he and I worked together in that capacity for a long time.
Okay.
And,
So
whereas we were both involved in the production and things, not so much in producing and making music together.
Okay.
But that's where it led to.
I see. Yeah. Was that back in the, 70s, 80s?
Well, that would have been in the 90s, actually.
Okay.
Maybe late 80s, very early 90s.
So have you always played keyboard? I mean, that's your main instrument, or?
That has been my main instrument. I was always a wannabe guitar player. I played brass instruments all through school, trumpet being my main instrument. But, trumpet, French horn, baritone, all of those, and actually carried that on into my performing years, too.
Speaking of performing years...
keyboard was always the main instrument.
Okay. Speaking of performing years, you've been on the road quite extensively around the country and around the world, right? Who are some of the people you've played with?
Well, I guess my first major artist that I ever had the opportunity to work with was Dobie Gray, and that was back in the very early '80s when he had a hit in the '70s with "Drift Away." And that was one of his big songs, and he came into Mississippi and did a series of shows around the state and surrounding area, and a band was put together to back him, and I got to be in that band. Sift through the years, Dorothy Moore, who of course is Malaco fame and the song Misty Blue, I got to play in her rhythm section for quite a number of years and did quite a bit of touring throughout the U.S. with her. Spent some time in Nashville. Cajun accordion player Joel Saunier, I spent many years in his band, in his touring band, traveling abroad. Paul Brandt was a country music star, up and coming during the 90s. I worked in his band. There was just a lot over the years but as far as touring goes, move on through the years, Tommy Malone of the Subdudes was I worked with extensively and recorded with. A gentleman from Mississippi named Jerika Singleton. I spent quite a number of years in his band, and also an artist named Mr. Sip, Castro Coleman, who's from Mississippi, who's a blues artist. I want to refer to as kind of new blues.
Mm-hmm.
But I really love working with all of those guys.
Yeah, Mr. Sip made the Malco book there toward the end, and he actually played Columbus recently.
Yeah, he's he does a lot of traveling, and I know that Tommy has been in Columbus too here recently.
Tommy,
those guys, Tommy Malone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, those guys are still out there beating the bush.
Nice, man. I hope they do well, because gas prices aren't real friendly to us today.
No kidding.
But so you connected with Tom easily, and did you when did you start recording at his place in Raymond, AVA Entertainment?
Well, several years back, I want to say maybe 3 years back, he approached me, letting me know what he was doing as he was developing. He was attempting to get off the road from driving a truck and get into a studio business, and that he had built a remote studio, and was wanting to, he was soliciting for business.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the more we talked, the more our thinking was in line. I had my own little personal studio here at my house, and for quite a number of years, and we just kind of put our heads together. I don't remember the very first thing that we worked on together, but the first thing that amounted to anything was yours and my friend Danny Brooks and his wife.
Mm-hmm.
That I got called in for that session. So I guess that was 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Maybe, and Tom and I hit it off good, and Danny and I worked well together, and it was just starting to assemble a group of, I guess a team would be a better
right.
better description, and he kind of insinuated that I fit into his picture as a team, so I just rode with that. I thought of that as being a very much a blessing, and we've kind of worked together ever since then.
Did you work together at Malaco with him? Did you do anything when he was there as an engineer?
I don't recall that he ever engineered any sessions that I played on, and I first got brought in to do and did a lot of demo sessions. Okay. There were several guys that were good friends at the time that were living in Jackson that kind of made up that demo band. We'd go in and 1 or 2 days a week and cut 4 or 5 songs, 5 or 6 songs, and I was never. It wasn't until later that I ever got into any of the major sessions. Okay. Because they would take those and farm it out and bring in the 18 players for that. I was more like a R or Q. I didn't fit in that first in the ABC.
Hey, at least you made the book, man. It seems like you always hear about the good old boy system and everything, but it's really about friendships. And one of the things that came through on the Malaco scene, especially with this fellow that wrote the book. He kept mentioning how everybody seemed like family. There was this friendly atmosphere. And to be honest with you, that's what I first noticed about Tom's scene. And I don't know whether it's a Southern thing, whether it's a Mississippi thing or a Jackson thing, but it's very noticeable. The friendship, the camaraderie, and the long-term relationships that seem to develop as a result. Like you're in my relationship, and Tom's in my relationship, and our relationship with Danny Brooks.
Well, you hit on a very strong point. One of the things, whenever anybody asks about the music scene, I always talk about, Malaco is the largest independently owned record company, I believe, still in the world. And they're a locally owned business. I mean, it's families that grew up here, raised here, so everybody knows everybody.
Yeah, it's really amazing. They've outlasted they've outlasted Stax and Motown and all the a lot of big names.
Yeah, and it never became corporate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're still recording local folks. I mean, of course, they've gone through their trials, but
Mm-hmm.
they're, still over there promoting local folks,
They sure are.
and still hometown folks running the business.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know you've experienced that through several of us that were fortunate enough to play on your project.
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of had their foot in or their toe in the water to some degree,
Mm-hmm.
in different facets there at Malacco.
Well, even so Tom took us on a tour, and I got to meet Tommy Senior and Junior, and I actually spent some time with Wolf Stevenson, who was just really welcoming and friendly and open. He told us about the projects he was involved in. It was great. I mean, I loved
Yeah.
it. So were you on the demo team with was Vince Barranco on that demo team?
Well, Vince was living in Nashville at the time.
Okay.
I actually did a lot of demos with one of his brothers, who is a very prolific writer, and just had his toes in a lot of different things, from jingles to writing for blues artists and things like that. So I worked with him quite a bit over there.
Well, hey, getting onto a different subject like gear, you've got a really great B3 sound that you play through an actual Leslie, right?
That's correct.
And what's the keyboard you use for that?
It's a Nord C2D.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful sound.
It's a digital organ, but to my ears, it's the closest thing to a B3 without having the real B3.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of clones out there, and have been for years, and nothing's like the real thing. A B3 is mechanical. It produces harmonics that is what raised the hair on my arm, and an acoustic piano does the same thing. And the digital world, you miss a lot of those elements, but that particular organ with the Leslie combination that I have is it can fool your ears.
It's really close. I mean, it's close enough for jazz,
Yeah.
And like you said, without having the real McCoy in place, it'd be nice if Tom could eventually land one of those for the studio. But I mean, just having that Nord with the Leslie is just really cool. And for your piano sound, what do you use for that?
Well, I've been a fan of Yamaha pianos for years, and Yamaha equipment. There's just something about they have a more realistic sound, and what I always loved about them was they were able to cut through the mix, or have enough bite to get through the mix. There's so many different instruments that you can play them, and it doesn't sit right. It doesn't sit well, and the Yamaha was always very responsive to my touch. I don't know whether that really has anything to do with it, but the combination, I just always liked the Yamahas because they fit better in the mix. And the particular model that I use is called the S80, and it hadn't been made in 20 years. But they changed the technology after that model, and they don't sound as good. So I've got a couple of those for just to have a backup and have if something were to happen, I've got something I could pull parts from if needed. But has been and still is my favorite.
Nice. And you've had those pieces for a long time, right?
I have. I've owned one of them for over 20 years. I bought a second one maybe 6 or 7 years later. And
when you play live, do you actually play through the sound system, or do you have an amp that you like to play through?
I always I carry an amp with me, just a small one, just so I can have some control for myself, hearing, and to get that timbre. Of course, I love playing on big stages, but I like closeness. I like to be able to, the closer we can be, the more I can feed off of what someone else is doing. And having my own speaker there, if I'm playing through a big sound system, I don't have any control over it, and I can't control what I hear and contribute to that small inner circle. And so for that reason, I carry my own.
I see. That's a great point, man. I mean, the intimacy that you get with playing live, playing, in close quarters, and having a connection with the other musicians. I mean, that's really important to me. In fact, that's one of the reasons I was excited to come to Tom's, is because I really wanted that band feel. So in June of 21, when I first came to AVA, when you and I think you were the first one in the door, and then Gary and Vince, and then we played together as a band. That was just that made the record for me.
Well, it was the feeling was mutual. When you describe record, it's you and I have talked before, and it's just about instant kin and friendship. And for me, I recognize the blessing in it that we had a conversation early on about our belief and our faith, and that I knew then that I got a brother here.
Yeah, I mean, same, and not so much since last June, but certainly since March, man. It's been a real blessing, spending time with you and getting to know Missy, and it's been a real blessing. I think that kind of camaraderie, that kinship, really translates on the record. Personally, I like the way Tom calls it G-rated boogie. It definitely grooves, but it's good. It's something. He puts it this way: it's something you could play for your mom.
That is a great description.
Yeah. So as far as playing over at with Tom Easley, you guys have formed a publishing company now, right?
That's correct.
And you've got a couple of artists you're working with. Do you see some good things in the wind as far as the way the industry is today, and being able to, actually make a living out of all that?
That's a good question. I guess my decision is I've always wanted to be a part of the industry in that way, and here's an opportunity. Whether it works or not, I don't know, but I know that it's taken me years to realize where my strongholds are, or what my gifts are, my given gifts, and I've never taken the opportunity to use them to their utmost, and I think this is part of it. I've told people for years and years and years, look, if you write lyrics, I can write music. And I've always been able to do that, but I've never really put it, just started physically putting it down and doing it. And that's one of the things that's happening now is we have two different artists who are both just writing daily, and I'm composing to go along with it.
Nice.
We've got several tracks down on both, and I don't know where they'll go, but at least we're doing it.
Well, you put you and the guys put a really cool spin on a couple of my songs. Like I remember back in June of 21 when we did the first four. Let me see, it was "Love You All the Time." I had envisioned that thing going to a G6, and you suggested just making it a full-on C major 7. Dropping it from the D to the major 7 a whole step down. And that just put a whole different spin on it. Made it more Motownish, sort of.
Well, some things we just tend to do naturally, and that may have been what it was. Sometimes there's things like that just feel right, and that doesn't mean that I'm right, but it a lot of times, hearing things differently is a good thing.
Yeah, that's true. Another song that we did in March was Waikiki. I always play that as a as a samba, a little more up tempo than what we ended up with. But when you guys did the soul thing on it, it was just like, wow, this changes the whole character of the song. You know, it just it
Well,
has a just real solid, laid back southern groove to it. It's just really amazing.
well, you've how would I put it? It's easy when you've got a good song to be creative.
Hmm.
When there's something there to work with, the rest just comes out.
Hmm.
Um, on the flip side of that, when there's something that's just disjointed and all garbled, and you have to sit down and make sense of it, sometimes it's harder for that creativity to flow out. But
Hmm.
it's wonderful to just walk in and go, okay, we listen to a demo of the song, and then turn around and just maybe chart something out, and then just play it, and it sounds like it's been there for 20 years.
Hmm.
And that's the beauty of when we talked about the team.
Hmm.
Assembling guys that are comfortable in that setting,
Hmm.
and not like I was in the early years and intimidated.
Hmm.
When I walked in and was watching all this going on,
Hmm.
it's comfortable, and it's like driving a car for me. When I sit down behind my piano, that's my comfort zone.
Hmm. Well,
And I like.
you sure do a good job of it, man. It was a pleasure working with you and the rest of the team. And I think that you guys have a really great thing going on there. In some ways, I wish I lived in the area so I could enjoy more of it. You know,
Well, I think we can make room.
I told Tom to let me know as soon as his neighbors decide to sell. But anyway,
Quite a blessing to have you as not only a friend that I love dearly, but the kinship that we have, and to be able to play on your project is just like icing on the cake.
oh man, the feelings are mutual, my friend. What's your favorite song on the record?
Well, I like them all, but there's one that I'm gonna have to look at titles, because one of my weaknesses is remembering names and remembering lyrics and things like that. I can remember the music,
Well,
but
hum a few bars. I'll let you know what it is.
yeah, do what's right. I love. Um,
That's a pretty funky number, man. Do what's right.
yeah, it is. I mean, that one just kind of jumps out at me.
Man, Kimball did a great job with the horns on that. And to be honest with you, I didn't have horns slated for any of this. And Tom says, man, this stuff is just crying for horns, don't you? I said, really? He was absolutely right. I, I guess that's why he's the producer.
Well, it, they got to be good for something.
Yeah. Oh, I love horns. I just didn't,
Yeah,
anticipate them on my record. I mean,
yeah.
but yeah.
And Kimball is a master of the art too. He's
Oh, yeah.
does such a great job.
Hmm. He had a couple of good guys with him on sax and trombone. And yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. What a great guy. Is there anything in particular you'd like to talk about?
Well, the thing specifically want to give thanks to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ,
Hmm.
and that's who brought us together and gave us the gift that we've been talking about.
Hmm.
And that more than anything is the most important aspect of our relationship. That He's brought us both out of the mire, and we get to experience these things of joy, which He gifted us with. And
Thank you for that, Sam. I mean, that is amazing. Firmly believe that this whole thing was set in motion by my Heavenly Father. And it's amazing how just, you could say, oh, wow, I just happened to be in Llano, Texas, and I just happened to pick up a Danny Brooks CD, and I just happened to, do this and that. And he just happened to record it with Tom Easley, But, I mean, when you look at it, you can say, yeah, I can see how God orchestrated this whole thing.
yeah, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. So,
Without a doubt.
So thank you for that, my brother.